Every time I hear that first reading, I'm reminded of, I think it was my first year teaching, and I was teaching sophomores scripture, and but there was a senior in that class. And, there's nothing worse than being a senior with a bunch of sophomores. And he always sat in the back, He was a sullen fellow, always wore black suit coat and black pants, looked like an undertaker. And he always had a briefcase. And he always sat in the back corner. He slunked in, went and sat down. Like he had to be there. And he was quite the character. Anyway, one day I was talking about this reading, and he never said anything. And he raised his hand. Yes, Dan? And he goes, are you a communist? And I said, yes, I am. The whole room gets up in arms. But I said, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. That's how religious live. We vow poverty, everything's in common. It really comes right from this scripture in Acts. And I said, you're reacting because you've come with, capital C communist. But it ended up being this really nice discussion. But I do think it was the only thing he ever said in an entire semester. Are you a communist? Why, yes, I am. We're communal people, right? And that's the thing about this gospel. I was trying to get people to understand last week, quite animatedly so, if you didn't see it or weren't here. Some said, what coffee did you have this morning? I just said, look, it really convicted me that if we don't start to do things differently, and I had literally parted my hair the other way, and I was wearing different clothes, I was trying everything to make the point. 2 points. One, if it doesn't look different how we live from the world, why would anyone believe it? And so then, and secondarily, what are you looking at? It makes a huge difference what you're looking at. Because here in this gospel, it happens again. Resurrected Jesus shows up, comes through a locked door, breathes on them, he empowers them. And how awesome is that? Imagine if it happened right now. We're just here and I'm yammering on and Jesus walks in, and works the room, touches all of us, empowers us. And our response was to go, wow, and then just go home. Actually, if we did that, we'd still be a step ahead of these guys. They just locked the door again. They literally did nothing in response to what he gave them, as near as we can tell. And then they have the audacity, the absolute audacity to kind of get excited to Thomas about it. Thomas, you won't believe it, this happened. Any surprise to you that he doesn't believe them? We've seen the Lord, he's risen. What are you talking about? The door's still locked. You're all hanging out in here, filled with love and joy and mercy. No, fear, filled with fear. I will not believe it until I experience it myself. So this is really resting on them and their miss of what he gave them. It never ceases to amaze me that this is always going to be our work as the followers, as the disciples, going to the end of this gospel. When Thomas, you believe because you've seen. Hey, how about those who have not seen, who have not had that miraculous experience and believe, who give their life, who surrender their witness to this love and to this mercy? How blessed are they? And that very last spot of, these things are written down. There are a lot of things he did, but these things are written down that you might believe. So what is different in us? What is the action that's going to testify to the world? Or is it just more of the same? And that was my point last week. It still is true now as it was then. What is the witness? Are we witnessing to the same things that the world does? And often the church is a reflection of the culture. That's the nature of the culture in which one lives. But we want to be countercultural in the best sense of that word. We want people to go, whoa, what are you doing? What is that that's different? Here's a prime example I saw since last Sunday. Some church, and I don't know when they did this, but this got hot on social media this past week. Some church in North Carolina, like Morovia Friends Church, whatever, they went and bought the medical debt of their community. And then, so here they have this paper, and at their church, they burned it. A year of Jubilee. They bought like $2 million of debt for pennies on the dollar. So you had the debt that the hospital had, and they sold that to a collection agency, and they couldn't collect it, and so they sold it off. So for pennies on the dollar, they bought all this medical debt, millions of dollars. And then they had a church service and burned it and set their people free from that bondage. That's as real as it gets. And I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but many people on Twitter took offense. Just like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, it shouldn't exist in the first place. And, oh, here we go. More toxins, more poison just being guzzled down as if that was going to take us anywhere. How can't you just name, and many would qualify. I mean, this is nice and all, but allow me to be cynical, allow me to be filled with fear, allow me to be glass half empty and pouring it out the bottom. Where will that ever take us but to more of the same? And I don't know about you, but that's not what I gave my life for. When I reflect on my baptism, when I reflect on my first Eucharist and my confirmation, and indeed my religious vows and priesthood, what I was signing up for was that others would know the goodness of God, that others would come to know that love wins, that others that particularly on the margins, that we're going to pull them in, and they're going to know the love and mercy of God. They're going to know the resurrection power of Jesus Christ. And they're not going to know that if what I'm giving them is more of what they already see. Anger and fear and, pulling it apart. I think there's a powerful bookend that goes with this story. And that is in the second creation account, God breathes the breath of life into the humus, the earth. We literally still use that word, right? If we talk about compost, that he took the earth, formed it up, breathed the breath of life in it. And at the other bookend is Jesus empowering them to share, to love, to do something different. And so that's a challenge for us as individuals, as a parish, as a diocese, as a community. What are the ways in which we're going to do something different? That we're going to testify to it. Otherwise, what brings us here today is awe, which is a fine start, but it is not the conclusion. If we just come here to worship Jesus, if we just come here to stare at the Paschal candle instead of pass it on, right? There's the distinction. If we just came for worship, if that was our only goal, well, first of all, Jesus never asked for it, so we're certainly not following what he asked for. What he asked us to do was follow him, and following him always leads to a cross. Sorry, that's just the way it is. But the cross always leads to resurrection. And there it is, laid out clean for us. And so do we want to just stare at the dancing flame of the Paschal candle? Or do we want to have the courage to light it and maybe get a little wax on us, as happens sometimes when we light a candle, and share it with others, to pass it on, something that's different, something that's useful and helpful and hopeful, in a world that's just filled with so much so much complaint. Again, last week, talking about kids today, Nobody wants to work anymore. All this malarkey that's been true for forever. If kids today were the problem and their disrespect, if today was the issue, why is it also mentioned in Leviticus, something written at least 3,000 years ago? And I had this conversation last night with a family from the parish. And but they're progressively getting worse. Well, yeah, but in 3,000 years, they have to be close to being completely irredeemable soon, right? That's not the problem. Disrespectful kids is not the problem. People that don't want to work is not the problem. The problem is people that are drinking poison and calling it water. People that are drinking down that which will never lead them to life and pretending that it is life. And people are calling the bluff everywhere, brothers and sisters. They call that bluff. So as we celebrate resurrection, this Divine Mercy Sunday, think about the ways in which, in particular in this week, that I'm going to testify to something different. I'm going to show mercy in a space that I haven't before. Like I said, it's captured people's imagination, this idea that this church bought debt and just set people free. It's very scriptural. What are the ways in which we're going to do something very different that has people who are busy in their life going, huh? What was that? What does that look like? Because I don't know about you, that's what converts me more and more to want to be a better disciple, is the witness of love and mercy, not the talk of it. I realize the irony in that I'm talking about it. I do. But in the end, right, that's what converts us, is the action, not the words. That's why the Word became flesh. The Word alone wasn't enough. He showed us how to live. He shows us how to die every day, to not be afraid of death. Because there's always a Good Friday, but there's always an Easter Sunday. So let us celebrate the joy and the love and the mercy of God. Be courageous enough to accept the challenges that are coming our way this week, even today, to testify to something different, that people who meet us will have met the risen Lord, not because we're perfect, but because we're faithful. We want to pass on the light from the Paschal candle. This Eucharist we're about to consume, that's passed on, right? For thousands of years, passed on, his body and blood, which will ensure that everyone leaves here different than they came in, more attuned, more in sync with the life of Christ, the love of Christ, and the mercy of Christ. May God be praised.